Rhetoric and the power it holds. For a better understanding of the power of rhetoric, we will start with the ancient philosopher Plato. Plato makes extremely bold statements about the power of rhetoric and the misuses of it. In his work, Gorgias, Plato uses the character of Socrates, who was Plato's teacher, by the way, to analyze the corrupt, however successful methods of persuasion. In ancient Greek times, art was considered to be tied to truth and beauty. According to Plato, however, rhetoric was not up to par with these standards. In Gorgias, Socrates explains that rhetoric is in fact not art, but a shrewd, gallant spirit which has a natural bent for clever dealing with mankind, and I sum up its substance in the name flattery. Though there is a lot of negative talk about rhetoric in this piece, the character of Socrates also believes that rhetoric has power over the soul. So though he condemns rhetoric as a way to omit true knowledge and producing flattery, he is still acknowledging that rhetoric holds power over people. In addition, it's easy to get caught up in the wise words of Plato, but one must also realize that while he's venting about the corrupt powers of rhetoric, he is using rhetoric to do so. Plato does this mostly through the use of rhetorical questions. This takes us to the famous scholar Aristotle, who was actually the pupil of Plato. Aristotle defines rhetoric as the faculty of observing, in any given case, the available means of persuasion. Aristotle's definition of rhetoric calls for discourse on rhetoric to move past the argument of whether there is good or bad in rhetoric. Instead, rhetoric should be seen as the ability to have such discourse. Without rhetoric, there wouldn't even be an argument of good and bad. This issue still remains relevant in the 21st century. We're constantly told of politicians with bad rhetoric.
It was nice. Oh, take your time. The second group, I was pretty nice. The third group, I'll be a little more violent. And the fourth group, I'll say, get the hell out of here!
Rough up. Maybe he should have been roughed up because it was absolutely disgusting what he was doing.
If you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of them, would you? Seriously. Okay? Just knock the hell. I promise you, I will pay for the legal fees, I promise. You know what they used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this? They'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks. Guards are very gentle with him. He's walking out like big high fives, smiling, laughing. Like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you. In the good old days, they'd rip him out of that seat so fast. Get him out. Try not to hurt him.
Patricia Roberts Miller is combating this idea of good and bad with her book Demagoguery and Democracy. This text does an amazing job showing the importance of rhetoric in political discourse. She too follows in Aristotle's footsteps by denouncing the binaries of good versus bad. She explains that there is more to the conversation than just the labels of good and bad. Roberts Miller calls for more focus on the content of what is being said. If it's possible, trying to pick out any fallacies of the argument, and most importantly, learning how to have a productive yet civil discussion about the opposing ideas. In the past, we have allowed rhetoric to overcome us. However, with a restored interest in rhetoric, scholars can move forward from simplistic binaries and focus on how we can use rhetoric to better ourselves and the society we live in. Remember, rhetoric holds power, but use it wisely.